Welcome to another episode of Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear, the podcast conversation with a change maker working to accelerate the transition to a sustainable, carbon-neutral society. I'm your host, Mitch Ratcliffe. What are the response to climate change and the Y2K computer bug, which required hundreds of thousands of technology workers to spend several years fixing in the 1990s, have in common? What can we learn from the two events that are so systemic? Both are complex problems that reach into every corner of our lives, or at least potentially do. And to some degree, Y2K showed humans these huge challenges can be overcome with self-organizing groups that span companies, nations, and languages. Our guest today is William Ulrich. He is president of Tactical Strategy Group and co-founder and board member of the Business Architecture Guild, a global not-for-profit association of business professionals dedicated to enabling strategy execution and business model transformation. Just by way of background, Bill worked extensively on the Y2K solution and has developed an approach to creating sustainable circular business models based on his decades of work on the practice of business architecture. Both Bill and I were deeply involved in Y2K. I covered Y2K for ZDNet and ABC News, and like climate change, the seriousness of Y2K was hotly and emotionally debated for several years before people began to take action. In the end, though, virtually none of the potential problems appeared. There were minor and isolated glitches, but no systemic failures of computers, stock markets, the electric grid, or other infrastructure, because well-informed people worked in the data centers of companies and governments to update software and sometimes hardware before New Year's Day in 2000. Bill and I met and got to know each other back during the Y2K era, and we recently reconnected to talk about designing the circular economy. Business architecture, a practice we'll explore during this conversation, provides companies a reliable foundation for identifying markets where circular ideas will create value and make plans, and we can make plans to implement them successfully. There's a whole lot to talk about here. You can learn more about Bill at tacticalstrategygroup.com. That's all one word, no space, no dash, tacticalstrategygroup.com. Welcome to the show, Bill. It's good to see you again. How you doing today?
Good. Thank you.
Well, I want to start off by asking you what we learned from working on Y2K, which involved updating and rewriting code on hundreds of millions of devices. What did the experience of working on Y2K teach you about organizing a response to a distributed and complex problem like climate change?
Well, Y2K taught us that unless there's an impending deadline on something, a lot of times senior business leaders will just sort of kick the ball down the road. Mm-hmm. And even with Y2K, it took a while to get a number of organizations going, and there were still late starters, right? So now I will also add that fixing Y2K in comparison to some of the business model shifts that, at least in my view, are important with supporting moving to a circular economy and supporting circularity are relatively straightforward. The Y2K was relatively straightforward compared to what we're looking at in terms of the shift to circularity and the business model changes.
Well, but relatively straightforward 20 years later in retrospect,
right,
is pretty easy to say because we now have had time to digest and understand that. But would a confident move to circular business practices even be possible if information technology had not solved Y2K? Would we not have the ability to be confident in this transition?
Well, I'll talk for a second on Y2K. There were two solutions. There was one that was fixing the data, which we pushed early on. And then there was a second one, which was working around the problem, which is what they did. And most organizations started late enough that they decided not to fix the data. So they ended up working around it. And they thought, well, we're going to replace everything with Java in about 2 years anyway. And those systems didn't get replaced. We ended up still running those systems. So, however many systems we had in 2000 when we rolled over, multiply that out a couple times. And that's what we're, and it's many hundreds of billions of lines of code out there. So I think we'll talk a little later about I can get in the state of technology, but the state of technology today is not in great shape. That doesn't mean we don't have great new things to do. I'm just talking about what is currently running in most organizations today. It's old.
It's and brittle.
And brittle,
is the right way to describe what's going on. But circularity involves a move to resilience as well.
It does, and we do need technology. So the paper I did with Giovanni, my writing partner in that one, a couple of reports we did was on the automotive manufacturing industry and the need for technology, both with its current business model, its manufacturing model, and the ability to improve that from a circularity standpoint. So getting a better handle on reuse of the vehicles and those types of things. Now, what most organizations want to do these days are, and many of these large manufacturers are doing, is they're tracing their products outside the showroom, right? So now they're in the market. And so they end up creating a lot of technology that goes into these cars and these vehicles. And what they do with that technology are two things, and which is why we wrote the paper in the way we wrote it. It was co-positioning the move to circularity with the value proposition that's added when you can tie it back to customer value and revenue growth and or cost savings. So what we called it the digitally connected customer, which is to stay connected to them and to the vehicle. At least when it's and actually even when it's not running, they can push downloads of software and they upload. A lot of people don't know these new vehicles, they're uploading data while you're running.
Oh, an immense amount. Yeah,
immense amounts of data, right?
I have friends working on this, and these companies now understand the condition of their vehicles at all times.
They do, and that was the whole point of having one business model feed the other. So now knowing the condition, right? If you can catch an issue prior to, people run around without oil changes in certain cars, you need to get those. Yeah. And all of a sudden the car doesn't work anymore and you need a new engine. So then you send it to the junkyard because it's no longer worth saving. So the idea with the digitally connected customer, while it does provide the customer the value and hopefully ideally increase revenue growth and the connection between the vehicle and the manufacturer and the customer, it also allows you to then make those intelligent decisions and trace that vehicle all the way through recycling, reuse. And I was going to mention in terms of reuse, I've got an old Firebird. And I get parts from the boneyard. So so I've got what used to be considered junk to crush is now being saved for reproduction parts, and sometimes it can be quite challenging, but it's an important thing that we're changing our thinking around that.
So there's a couple of terms that I just want to talk about a little bit, and then we'll go on to the more circular models. But first, business architecture, which is an area you have pioneered. It involves systems thinking, rigorous analysis of the impact of changes across the supply chain, the financial infrastructure. How do you explain the benefits of business architecture practices to executives who ask you about it?
Right. We try to keep it simple. We try to explain as little as possible. It can be a very dry topic, and you quickly see eyes glazing over people's head, and they are sitting there thinking, well, we don't need to hear all this. So you got to go to their sweet spot. So what we do is we focus on two areas message wise. One is organizations are frankly not very good at executing their strategies. They deliver on those, and their confidence is low. And a lot of times it has to do with the strategy itself, but more often it has to do with the way it's sort of just tossed out there to all the different business unit silos and splintered out. So they don't execute well. Part of why they don't execute well is because they can't see past their silos, their business unit silos. So everybody goes off and does their own thing. And then at the end, you're supposed to have some sort of solution and it doesn't work and doesn't fit. On the technology side, people have experienced this all the time. You put something in and you broke 25 other things, right?
Well, so metaphorically, you end up with a house built by 17 different contractors, none of them even fitting together.
Right. So our message on business architecture is it provides a perspective on the business that can be used from strategic planning through software deployment, requirement software deployment, end to end, and everything in the middle, the design work, the impact work, the investment analysis that needs to be done, everything in the middle, you use business architecture because it's a holistic view of the organization. The other thing is that organizations deliver successful projects less than less than 30% of the time, which means 70% of the time projects either fail outright, underdeliver, and or run over budget, which anybody who's ever worked on most IT budgets, and I do a lot of workshops with people, and most people say every project I've ever been on has been over budget. It's run over time, usually double, triple the budget, and under delivers at the end of it when they finish. So those two areas are the focal points we talk about with business architecture. Now, if people push it, we say, well, what we're basically doing is mapping out the organization, and people they go to business processes. We don't use that. We use we have a different approach with capabilities and value perspectives, information perspectives. So a lot of people have to sort of reorient themselves to that approach and thinking. Again, we don't try to get the details to the executive. What they want to hear is, how can you help me do my job better and deliver value for my customers and the organization?
So the other term is circularity.
Yes.
How is thinking circularly different than the focus of the information era, which Bill Gates epitomized in his comment, optimize.
Yeah.
Why is optimizing enough to be circular?
Right. I think one of the things that I've said is organizations have optimized themselves into a corner. So, and this ties back to some statistical analysis that was done a number of years ago in a book, a couple different books on process flows and process work. And today, because we've automated a lot of the simple processes that can be done, or we should have, 20 to 40% of what's left are repeatable processes that are predictable. 60 to 80% of those are not predictable and non-linear. And what happens is that business process models, which is the main optimization tool people have been using, other than laying off 10,000 people, not to get too current with the news, but laying off 10,000 people to cut costs. It's the main tool that they've been using to optimize things. So what they've done is that they've created these linear processes. Much of that has gone into the software, which, by the way, has made the software sort of rigid and less robust. Yeah. But now what's left is the work of the knowledge worker. Not the continuously repeatable, predictable work, but the unpredictable, non-repeatable, non-linear work, which let's say I'm a loan officer. I need to make a decision. I may go to the credit officer. I may go out to the credit bureau. I may go to the contract officer. May go back to the customer. I may go back to anybody else. There's no necessarily sequence of the work, and I could be doing things in parallel. So if you try to tie the hands of a loan officer, and it's an underwriter, simple example, into some kind of linear process, what you're going to do is you're going to take the most talented people and put handcuffs on them. So we have optimized themselves into a corner. And now if we try to optimize those processes further using the same approach, we'll actually make things slower. And when we talk about what's been done, there's more software today than there was 20, 30 years ago. But there's also as much manual work that's going on. And a lot of organizations, which people don't realize, are running on spreadsheets. And I have a couple examples there. One of them is a fund management company, and they had about 25 to 30,000 spreadsheets. This is not a large one, but it's a household name. And without those spreadsheets, none of the systems would basically have any data in them. And there were like warehouses of large groups of people. I was out to one of their facilities here in California, and they had, as far as I could see, cubicles of people who were probably all in their 20s, all working on spreadsheets, as far as I could gather. The other one was a manufacturing company, a global manufacturing company, not one of the largest ones, but a good mid to large one. Said, one of the guys said up in front of an audience of about 20 or 30 people that if our SAP ERP system stops working, it's an inconvenience. If our spreadsheets break, our production assembly lines stop working. So this goes way beyond what people understand here.
And a lot of people don't understand what the spreadsheets they're working on are actually doing. And so they're almost insulated from the actual operations of the business. So this is the question as I read your papers and during our previous conversations that I've been thinking, is there a different pace and scale involved in circularity? And how should companies think about reorganizing themselves in order to address this?
Holistically, that is the pace and scale. So what happens is if you try to go to, and it's really executing any strategy or trying to shift any business model. If you're trying to go into a circular environment, you have to have the organization working as a unit. That doesn't, a lot of organizations don't work like that today. Everybody has their own little corner. In fact, the silos have gotten worse over the last, I would say, decade or so, where they've created sort of these sort of false security blankets where it says, you know, I'm in my little silo. And if you want something from me, I'll deliver that to you as a service. Almost like you're an outside partner, a third party, right? And instead of working as a cohesive whole, right, which you need with circularity, because what you've got to have is all of the parts need to be working together, you know, to dealing with, you know, if you're in marketing or whether you're in sales or whether you're in the area that repossesses assets or you're in the area that's building the asset or the area that's making the technology that tracks the assets, or you're in a customer support area or other area where you need to engage and work with your partnership, right? And the partners, by the way, are part of the ecosystem. And I know we're going to talk about partners later, but it needs to be a holistic approach as opposed to this fragmented approach that we're going about today.
Now, you make an important distinction about the difference between wasteful linear economies and circular ones. Tell us about the difference between a value cycle and a product life cycle. Why does focusing on how a business creates value improve their strategic thinking?
Yeah, traditional product life cycles are, you know, and there's a couple different views of this. There's sort of the marketing product life cycle of the product's in a growth path. It's in an early stage. It's in a growth path. It's hit maturity. It's on the downside. So then we stop marketing it. But then there's the other life cycle, which is the product itself, which is primarily, and sort of the way we draw it out, and most people do, the product goes out, it works for a while, and a lot of these things you can't even fix anymore. So you throw them in the junkyard, right? And they end up in a landfill. So that's the sort of the traditional life cycle if you follow the product out. The circular life cycle is this continuous focal point on repair, maintain, extend, and then where appropriate, and at the right time, you know, we recycle and reuse to the best of our ability. Now that changes with different types of products, but if it's a physical thing, right, we want to extend it as long as possible, which may or may not be in people's business model. Maybe if you're a manufacturing company with a throwaway mindset, and you depend on people throwing away your product every 2 years and buying a new one, that could be a problem for you, right? So you may need to rethink that. But extending the life of what's out there to a certain point, following through a life cycle. We talk about, you know, partners picking up older vehicles and doing things with them, all the way to the point where instead of like we used to do, we just take things and crush them. We take and reharvest the parts and the other things out of there. Because it's expensive to melt everything down and start from scratch and build a whole new type of vehicle out of that.
If there's an alternator out there, it's a lot cheaper to get the used alternator. And
yeah, exactly.
Less
right.
Impact on the environment.
Yeah. So what we want to do is we want to look at that in a broad scale, and then you know, partner up with our partners best we can. And that again, they're part of our ecosystem. They're really organizations don't always think this way, but the partners that fulfill certain capabilities for you, they're really part of your ecosystem, right? They're just doing it on contract, right? So instead of you doing it in-house, now you can move it in-house, you could have them do it, but those partners need to be part of this overall ecosystem for everything to work effectively.
Now, as you talk with business leaders, it seems to me there's probably three different driving forces behind their potential embrace of circularity. Do they see it primarily as tied to risk management, which means keeping up with the competition as sustainability changes consumer values? Do they see it as maintaining regulatory alignment? In other words, we have ESG reporting requirements now, we just got to do it. Right. Or do they see it as a clear opportunity to grow?
Well, one is when you talk about keeping up, I think organizations or business leaders are being forced into a sustainable mindset or sustainable model. And the reason is because, the other organizations are doing it. So you're starting to see a trend, although it's not a huge stampede, but you are seeing a trend where sustainable business models, and they really aren't built into the completely built into DNA of these companies. It's a lot of it's foreign to them. But the sustainable business model is something that they do want to do, because they know if they're doing that in the marketplace, they can get a broader set of attention, particularly from the younger buyers who are looking for sustainability, right? Now, I would say that the way to get to circularity, or the way to encourage business leaders to incrementally move more, but more quickly to circularity, is to tie it to value propositions that they can see. One is risk reduction, right? And I think you can tie some of these things together, and regulatory alignment, and overall growth, and improving the customer value as well. So my experience is that you really want to connect circularity with other value propositions that are already planned and already in the works, and say, we can do these things. If we're going to make these business model shifts that are envisioned, we can incorporate circularity into this. And the mere fact of doing that will not only provide you value and the environment value, because that is one of sort of the three pillars, right, you stand on for sustainability, but it also provides a value proposition for our customers. And at the end of the day, the idea is that you should see growth and expansion of your particular organization if you can tie all these things together.
Now, one of the criticisms of the way we currently operate our economy is it's focused on growth. But when we talk about growth, it doesn't mean the net growth of the economy overall necessarily, but the transition from one organization capturing that value to another. When you talk about the concept of growth with companies, do they also see moving towards more of a steady state operation mindset?
Wall Street doesn't like that all the time, which is one of our problems, right? So I'd like to say yes. There's still a lot of people out there who believe that instead of sort of this steady incremental, continuous value, that they want to go, shooting up. When I first got out here to Silicon Valley, it was all new to me. So when I had been a consultant for a number of years, but I moved out here, and everybody was talking about, this is in the early 90s, and everybody's talking about, I couldn't meet anybody who wasn't talking about taking this public or taking that public. It was everything wanted to go public, and everything wanted to shoot up, and everybody wanted to make a quick buck, and everybody wanted to get out, right? And the company I came out here with actually got sold eventually to a larger company, but I'd like to say that there is a resettling of thinking around just a continuous, sustainable, long-term model. And there are, organizations out there who have been in business for many, many years, and they're a pretty steady kind of growth. I forgot who owns them now, but the one who's sort of strange example is the Pez company. Who makes the little candies and things, right? You don't see them advertising, but they're still there, and you can still go out and buy Pez. And, and I think that, they probably haven't had a whole lot of ups and downs over the decades, but, they've been around a long time, and people still have it. So, it's a kind of a candy, but
better to survive than die.
And they're still here, right? So if you go back to, we go back a few decades, and we look who was in the, some of the top market making companies, or even the top technology companies, right? And Apple and Microsoft aside, you start to see that, these companies aren't here anymore, right?
Well, Apple almost didn't make it either.
And Apple had a close call, right? Yeah. And so fact,
Microsoft saved them.
And it's a mindset that has to continuously shift. There's still a lot of companies are battling now, more so for they're trying to make sure that they're hanging on to the markets they've got and get to new markets. But these are more traditional companies, and so I think there is a big opportunity there for a lot of those organizations.
Well, I think exploring that opportunity is going to be a great conversation. We're going to take a quick commercial break and be right back to do that. We're back to continue the conversation with Bill Ulrich. He is with Tactical Strategy Group. He's the principal there and also co-founder and board member at the Business Architecture Guild. So I think we've laid out the basic ideas here, and you were talking about the notion of steady state or how we grow. Resource use can be steady state potentially in a circular economy. You don't need to go get more virgin ore, or at least nowhere near as much. But the value add is in the management of everything around those resources and those resources themselves. And that brings us to this idea of business in addition to production and distribution, which are the two focal points of the linear economy. In a circular economy, needs new functions like repair services and reuse programs like you were talking about. I've worked on projects like phone as a service, where you replace and reuse a smartphone across multiple generations of customers. You were talking about car companies doing the same thing. So a few questions come from that. What are the functions that you think are important to consider when creating a circular business model?
Right. So, and partners are important, and we are talking about here probably physical goods in many cases, mm-hmm. and those can come from many sources or many types. But I think having those partners is one key factor, and having them in an integrated environment. And an integrated environment can mean extending your technology umbrella to those partners, so that they are not on the outside trying to fight their way in, or every time they're trying to contact you or work with you, but they've got an integrated environment where they're working together. Some examples, there are small examples on that, where the car, the body shop, the repair shop, has a desk sitting there for one of the insurance guys. Right. And the insurance guy comes in and, he spends a few hours there a week and works directly with them, making sure that, the car, I unfortunately had to deal with a total car. I didn't total it, but I was dealing with a total car a few years ago, and figuring out what to do with that thing, right? And mm-hmm. where's it going to go, and how you're going to get paid out. So and in that environment, that fellow was tied into their technology environment. They had access to their systems. So I think it's expanding that umbrella in terms of who has access to your technology. The thing, I think, if you step back, you need to have complete traceability, digital traceability, mm-hmm. right? To know where things are. I've had my car over at this place for a month, and not to keep coming back to that, but it had to do with being able to find things. And, it's very difficult, especially when you're getting into these, it's no longer, if you're on warranty for, 3 to 5 years, right? Then you're past that window. At some point, the manufacturing company, maybe rightly so, stops making the replacement parts, right? Mm-hmm. And especially if they discontinue the model year. So, and you can see, I think, 20 years from now, or 10 to 15, 20 years from now, the technology that's inside of our vehicles today mm-hmm. is going to at some point fail. And trying to even get sensors for older cars has been tricky. Now, are they still going to be making all the computer chips necessary? I was just reading about the new Corvette to keep the electric engine in the front and the gas powered engine in the back synchronized, such that There's going the same, and what if they can't get that part 20 years from now? For Corvette, they're probably going to still be making it, but you have to figure out who are the business partners that continuously can remake and reuse, so you don't have to take these things. Your worst case is it's in the boneyard and you're harvesting parts. But a better case is you keep the vehicle on the road mm-hmm. and upgrade it in ways that you can keep it sustainable. And, there are new technologies out, like, you can create a lot of different things out of these 3D printers, right? Mm-hmm. So there is technology out there if companies are willing to release the spec for some of these things. So you've got that whole sort of mindset that you can't have this. It's our trade secret. Well, it was your trade secret 20 years ago, but it's not your trade. You need to open it up now, right?
Yeah. Well, that notion of confidentiality preventing the kind of collaboration that is necessary in the circular economy has come up in many of our conversations. But one of the things I hear you saying is that on the one hand, you can integrate a very deep value chain. But the way business thinks is to vertically integrate it and bring it all internally. Do they need to stop thinking that way? And there are some concepts that we can use to rethink that, like stewardship, ownership, changing how we think of ownership and product and service liability in a circular system. How do you recommend a business think about assembling that initial circular environment rather than trying to build it all themselves?
Yeah, I don't think any organization can deliver all the capabilities they need by themselves. And if you actually, in business architecture, we map that out. So we identify the key partners that are actually performing capabilities for you. So you say, well, if we remove this one, then you no longer do these things or can't do these things. And so we have to integrate that perspective, and we have to welcome it in. Now, we also have to look at, we'll talk more about geography, I think, later, but we also have to look at geography. So if the only place we're outsourcing our manufacturing to is a place where we can't get that product from anymore, right? Whether it's Asia or wherever else it is. I was just listening to somebody explain the other day, most of our pharmaceuticals used to be made in Puerto Rico, and then we ended up moving them far away, right? And now, they still have the facilities, they still have the people, they still have the skill sets. Why do we do that? Well, you saved a few pennies on the dollar, right? So I think you have to take a step back and look at long term, not how much money you're going to save this quarter or this year on your bottom line, but look long term at the risk you're opening up in your supply chains when your supply chains are extended that far and that thin, right? So yes, you should be working with partners. And yes, they should be sustainable partners. And yes, they should be in your ecosystem, right? But you also have to look at the risk. Whoever makes the decision to say, well, we used to make it here, but we can save a few bucks by making it out there, right? And ask yourself, what happens if there's a problem in that, the geopolitical system that's going to cause some kind of issues there. So we don't have to, all the organizations don't have to do everything themselves, but if you are going to partner and have an integrated circular environment,
right.
You have to have one that you can rely on and look at risk as a consideration there.
So how do you suggest companies measure their progress towards circular models, and what key performance indicators or metrics do you suggest they use to identify when they have a winning approach to the circular economy?
Yeah, I think measurement's an interesting one because I'm not sure what kind of metrics are out there at this point. But the ones I would see probably tie back to product life cycle in the market as being key. A second one, and I don't know how well they measure this, is product reusability versus recyclability. And both of those are important because some things you can't reuse, some things you can reuse. So you reuse where you can and recycle what you can. And if you can get to percentages on certain products that you're putting out where you get a high degree of reusability, and you can get then the corollary of that is a high degree of recyclability, right? So you can reuse as is or recycle. I think those are metrics you need to look at. And the other one is, just being able to have a sustainable business model that doesn't depend on a 2-year life cycle of your product versus a 10-year life cycle, right? And so,
the shortening of life cycle would be something you'd be looking for.
Yeah, the head of, right, and well, I want my products in the market. Obviously, I want to sell more of them, right? And I put new features on things to sell those. And but even if somebody's going to have a vehicle for 2 years and sell, that used to be the old school thinking. I have it 2 years and now I'm going to sell it, right? And offload it to somebody else. Even if you do have that mindset, when it is sold, right? it should continue its life, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Does every rent-a-car company have to have a brand new set of vehicles? No, and they don't. And there's a market for that, right? There's a used car. Well, now there's an interesting used car market because the prices went up on used cars. So I think people are driving their vehicles a little longer. They got forced to do this because of supply chain issues, right? I think that's fine. The used cars are harder to get and more expensive. That means that there's more of a market for those used cars as opposed to sending them to the junkyard. So, I think that's a good thing, but we got forced into that by supply chain issues with COVID and that. So, I still think from a metric standpoint, you're looking at, extending product longevity. And maybe your development life cycle of your product can get tighter or shorter. But the other thing is cross integration of products and how much of that I've got. I still can't figure out why some of the parts that were made in the two vehicles made in the exact same factory at the exact same time, which are sitting on the exact same frame, we're using completely different parts, for like everything from turn signals to everything else. It's like, what is that? What in the world did they need to do that for differentiation purposes?
Well, and that's for me one of the reasons that the Ford F-150 Lightning is interesting is it's built on the same foundation and uses the same components, and therefore is a less expensive car to produce than a bespoke EV.
Right.
I'm wondering if you have advice for employees who see an opportunity in their company to build a circular economy, to use business architecture ideas to convey it to management and get something to change.
Yeah, one of the things I tell people is to get in front of, one is find out your top 3 to 5 business goals and objectives that are set by your leadership. Now, not all of that's in your executive report or your annual report, but your financial reports, but you can look at those and get some insights into what they're trying to accomplish. Then what you have to do in a lot of cases, break those down into something that's more actionable. And that's sort of just standard part of strategy development. But if you can bring a message to business leaders that we can do this, but that sustainability goal that you put into your annual report and then everybody forgets about it, right? That sustainability goal you have, we can do both of those things at the same time. And the way we would do that is to look at potentially shifting to this new business model or adding in a secondary business model like the vehicle companies. And they're not the only ones, but to put much better customer contact traceability on the vehicle, traceability on some of the parts, that type of thing. We can do that. And it's going to be good for sustainability, which people can market. And it's going to be good for, the business goals you've already got out there that you've set. And again, they can be supply chain goals. They can be related to, expanding your customer base, your market base. They can be cost savings. It's whatever it is. But I tell people that you're not going to get a whole lot of attention from business leaders unless you can provide a dual value proposition, something they want to do, as well as the sustainability aspect of it.
Well, so that raises a couple of questions, or at least one question with two sides. Should companies, when they make these commitments, become transparent about not only what their goals are, but their progress toward those goals, so that collectively we can learn more about the challenges we face? And on the other side of that, can consumers use some of these business architecture ideas to understand whether companies that they shop with or buy services from are making genuine commitments and real progress towards circular, sustainable operations?
Yeah, I think on the first part, I'm big on transparency. So I would say that if you published your roadmap on your movement towards sustainability and circularity, and said that you are making these moves. And a lot of times your stock, if your shareholders, if you're a public company, want to hear that. But also the public wants to hear it. So if you can publish, here's what we're doing to move towards circularity, that is a positive thing. Because it's not just, going on a 20-minute or 20-second commercial and saying, we're more sustainable. It's actually that you're demonstrating that there's action and you're putting out their milestones, right? Now, not that transparency may not be in everybody's DNA, but that's what I think people should do.
Well, but there's a real challenge there, because most companies, because of their sense that everything needs to be confidential in order for them to have a market advantage, they won't tell anybody that some of their goals turned out to be harder than they thought. And so they miss the opportunity to share that knowledge, maybe get the answer from some other business, or to co-design a solution with their customers who are actually interested.
I think the reality is that when business leaders don't, and I saw some statistics on this, but the top leadership knows about 5% of what's going on in the company, right? And the rest of it's about 95%. And if you go down a level, they know more, but they don't know that much, right? And if you go down to the management level, you still have they know about 50% of what's going on. And if you don't go down to the worker level, which is where real innovation comes, right? If you don't go down to the worker level, you're going to miss opportunities for innovation. You're going to miss opportunities for feedback on your overall strategies. So I'm a big proponent in strategy execution of having continuous feedback loops where innovations can be fed back into the strategy, where if something's a bad idea, somebody's not going to get fired for saying that it's a bad idea. Yeah. So I'm a big proponent of that. And I think that there's not a realistic understanding of, at least at the top level, of just how bad some of these technology environments are. Getting back to that for a minute, the work environment that people are in that is based on manual workarounds. There's always one hero that somehow gets something to work. I mean, we only see the very tip of the iceberg on system issues that happen to get publicized. We have to ground all the planes across the United States because of a software issue, right? And everybody has these all the time. It's just that all of them don't get to the point where they're in the news.
Right.
So there's a real issue out there. So your optimistic goals of trying to get things done are usually off base. So when you're setting, the one thing if you're setting a roadmap and you're transparent about the roadmap to circularity, I think you have to be honest as well that it's going to take you a period of time to do that. It's going to be significant, because I saw one organization, very large, insurance, financial services, make a commitment to move to a customer-centric business model. They have been around for 100 and however many years and have been completely siloed, where your auto policy, you and your auto policy are completely segregated from you and your homeowner's policy, et cetera, right? They've been completely segregated. So shifting to that, they had that as a 5 to 10 year goal. Right. People are afraid to create 5 to 10 year goals these days. And I think you have to put that out there. You have to demonstrate, we have this 5 year, 3 year window, 5 year window, 10 year window. Those are the ones I normally work on. Right. And say, well, you can't really tell what's going to happen too much after that. But if you go to Japan, they've got longer term goals, right, than that.
And there's definite strategic benefits to looking longer term. So this has been a great conversation. I want to ask this question in closing. You've been following the evolution of the circular economy for a long time. How far along on the road to circularity do you think we are today? And what are the big breakthroughs, the important breakthroughs you're looking for to catalyze rapid adoption of circularity?
Yep. So a couple of years ago, I interviewed Walter Stahill, who some consider him the father of circularity. And he wrote, I guess, the book that inspired myself and Giovanni Traverso to put our papers out and some of the other work we've done in this area. And he's been in the field for decades. Now, he's still optimistic and feels that the traction is picking up. So I do believe that, and I think that progress can be tied to a couple of things. One is that organizations are being forced to reinvent themselves and their business models today or go away. And, a lot of unforeseen things have happened, much more than we've ever anticipated over the last 5 years or so, even 10 years with financial meltdown. And then the second one is advancements in not just the technology, because we have great technology today. We are not deploying it very well. right? So I think a lot of the technology out there is being underutilized. A lot of the systems that are out there have not only been designed using older tools and software and hardware, which isn't necessarily bad, but it's also been designed under a different sort of mindset or paradigm of the optimized, right? Code out this straightforward process, automate the thing, and lock everybody in on it. That freezes people's hands. So I think that there has to be, in addition to the technology, we need to have disciplines like business architecture to get people to rethink about approaching things in a much more holistic way, where we can do not cross-silo solutions, cross-silo strategy deployment, and cross-silo circular, the move to circularity, right? So it's not just the technology, but it's also the disciplines that need to accompany that. And I will say organizations are getting there. I'm very pleased to say that the Business Architecture Guild, which is a not-for-profit association, but it's got members around 3,500, I think, currently, in well over 100 countries. And so this is not an isolated thing. It's not just a US thing or a European thing. It is a global movement that's going on. There's still pushback from in some cases. The executives aren't they're ignoring it and not buying in. Some do. But they're not quite there yet. So we have to also think out of the box. The way we've been doing things for the last 30 years, if the business process is not a solution to every problem we have, right? I can't take a hammer and pound in a screw, right? Which is what people have been trying to do as of late. So I think people need to rethink things. They need to stop, looking at silver bullets and jumping out to the next shiny object. And get back to the business that they need to focus on, the core business, and then look at their business model and look at it holistically, and then say, I want to achieve these 3 to 5 major goals, and how do we move to circularity in consort with that? And I think it's possible. I mean, that's the way we described it with the automotive example we wrote about in our reports. So I very much think that organizations can do that.
Well, Bill, that's encouraging to hear, and it brings to mind the author William Gibson's comment that the future's already here. It's just unevenly distributed. The question is how quickly we can distribute it and how rapidly we can learn not only what works, but what might not work. We might have recognized, for instance, that when introducing fossil fuels, that in the long term, and in fact, there were scientists who said it, that would be a bad idea.
Yes, indeed. And who killed the electric car back 110 years ago, right?
Well, this time we've got another opportunity, and I want to thank you for shining some light on it.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Mitch.
We've been talking with Bill Ulrich. He's the principal at Tactical Strategy Group and co-founder and board member at the Business Architecture Guild. Check out business architecture as an idea. It's got a lot of power. We just have to figure out how to use it better. Bill's also the host of North Star Radio Show on Voice America's Business Channel, and we're going to include links in the article that accompanies the podcast to the 2 articles that he mentioned about designing circular economies so that you can read them. I'm going to have to listen to this interview several times because there was a lot to think about, but I think there's 2 key points to take away. First, the idea of business growth is going to change. Our relationship with materials will enter an era in which we extract far less virgin ore from the earth and make what we do mine last far longer. In other words, more of a steady state relationship with materials. But on top of that, on expanding layers of services that coordinate repairs, reuse, recycling, as well as all sorts of value-added experiences that improve our product relationship, new updates to your car, new updates to your phone or to your washing machine or refrigerator, for instance, that improve its efficiency and make it do new things. This information layer of the economy is exploding into existence now. You can see it in immersive virtual reality, generative chat platforms like ChatGPT that everybody's talking right now, and the widespread growth of artificial intelligence in business and government in terms of just measuring and responding more quickly to what's actually going on right now. The other important idea for business to take to heart is that ambitious goals require the company to embrace humility and transparency, that they become comfortable with sharing setbacks along with progress. The climate crisis isn't going to be solved by silver bullet solutions, but broad transformations of our infrastructure and economy, which requires that we disclose information so that everyone, including the entire supply chain and the consumers that rely on them, can learn and improve together. If anything, that disclosure can help identify the unknown unknowns that can upend our progress unexpectedly. So I think spending some time thinking about business architecture, even if it feels a little esoteric, is a great way to step back and look at your business or the companies that you do business with and ask useful questions. I hope you take a few minutes to share this or any of our other more than 360 episodes of Sustainability Within Your Ear with your friends, your family, your neighbors. Please tell your boss about business architecture. You folks are the amplifiers that spread the ideas that lead to a less wasteful world. Let folks know they can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, iHeartRadio, and other fine purveyors of podcast goodness. We will appreciate your support, particularly if you would take a moment to leave a review. That helps people find us even more. Thank you, folks. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. We're going to be back with another innovator interview soon. In the meantime, take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.